Welcome to Sticky Interviews. I'm Nathan Simmons, Senior Leadership Coach and Trainer for MBM, Making Business Matter, the home of sticky learning. We are the provider of leadership development and soft skills training to the grocery and manufacturing industry. The idea of these interviews is to share great ideas, great concepts and great ways these skills are being used to help you be the best version of you in the work that you do. Welcome to the show. Welcome to this sticky interview with me, Nathan Simmons, Senior Leadership Coach and Trainer for MBM, Making Business Matter. Got the great pleasure of interviewing and having a conversation with Derek Bruce. We've already had one connection conversation and I got to dig into a little bit about his history, his experience. Got a phenomenal bio and I love reading some of this stuff. Background in leadership and people development, consultancy and business communication, which he gets from working with market-leading global organizations in the financial services, media, retail, engineering industries. But not only that, he knows business culture as well as world culture. Born originally UK in Brixton, he's living between Amsterdam and Milan right now, hosting large-scale digital and physical events for industry-leading organizations, as well as speaking at global seminars and conferences. That in itself, Derek, is pretty phenomenal. It's, I guess, some of the life that we all wish and aspire to get to, you know, being able to do some of that stuff. And the best bit about him is this bit I love, that, and I know this because I feel this in the conversation we had. You know, he prides himself on building trust and long-term relationships to help people accomplish their goals. And we're going to dig into some more of that later on in this conversation, because there's some really critical, vital pieces of work that you're bringing your attention to, which I definitely want you to put the lens on today. And it says these are also the principles of his own organisation, Derek Bruce Associates.
Yeah,
absolutely, 100%. Derek, welcome to here. Welcome to this show. Thank you very much for being here.
Cheers for the invite.
Always, first question from me, for anyone that I'm interviewing, why do you do what you do?
It's kind of a funny story. I kind of fell into it. So years and years and years ago, I was working for Prudential and applied for many jobs, got into there and started working, believe it or not, on an IT help desk. I was helping people do a computer thing, turn it off, turn it on again, worked wonders. But I kind of then fell into learning and development because we as a team were helping people with IT systems. And through my career at Prudential, and they gave some awesome development. It's a great environment to work in. They really supported their staff. And in my almost 13 years there, I kind of moved from IT into presenting IT, into presenting solutions for sales, and then into learning development, and then into leadership development and change. So I do what I do because I like it, but I kind of fell into it. There wasn't a plan to get to this point, unfortunately.
And that's, for me, that's strange in itself, because most people end up going into IT because, okay, there's a stereotype of people that go and work at IT help desks. I can't get away from that. And most people go there, and I'm a nerd, I'm a geek, you know, I'm a reformed geek, you know, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons, those sorts of things. It tends to be those sort of people that go to work for IT help desk. And it's very rare, from my view of the world, that you see people coming out of that space to go into more learning and development and people spaces. But the part you highlighted there, which was phenomenal, was it kind of about that Prudential creating that right environment for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's a company which, if I now look back at where I've worked, and I've worked in some great companies, but it was probably slightly ahead of its time in terms of the way they cared about staff, the inclusion of making people being able to be the best they can be. They invested, for example, in my CIPD qualification. They paid me to actually be qualified to do learning and development while I was working there. They then helped my career move from learning and development to get experience of doing sales stuff as well, to get experience of doing project management. And this was all part of how almost the DNA of the organization was, which was to get the most out of people by creating the right environment where they could do the best. And quickly we realized that I could tell people to do the IT stuff, but it wasn't really where my skill set was. So that's why I moved into the L&D role.
That's phenomenal, because especially when you look at the financial sector, and I don't know if it's a historic thing or it's a recent thing, is a lot of the financial industry is purely about the numbers, not necessarily about the culture. I certainly didn't feel a lot of that when I was in the financial sector. It's about, how many sales, how many numbers, because that's what they're selling at the day, money, which is a number. Whereas Prudential created this right kind of incubator to support understanding actually where your best skills are, where to develop you, and how to support you making that journey as well.
Yeah, it's funny because if I look back at some of the experiences which were provided to me and the fact that they really developed people, the development was key. They wanted you to actually be the best you can be, as I mentioned, and the environment, the inclusion piece was really important, but also the engagement of employees was important. So everything from, I worked in 142 Holborn Bars, which is this beautiful old building in the centre of London. And it's one of those places you walk into, kind of like the Harry Potter building, and you feel the history, you feel the, what's happened there before. And my first day, I remember vividly, I was only 18, 19, I was taking a tour around the building, and it had like an underground theatre, it had a gym, it had all this stuff from God knows when financial services had all been started. And on my first Friday, a lady came around with a drinks trolley, with alcohol as well. And it was kind of like every floor, people could just have a drink Friday afternoon, just stop and talk to your colleagues, unwind together. And for me as an 18-year-old going into organization, that environment, it was kind of like, okay, this is kind of surreal, but it's awesome. And it kind of gained also, because people who work for Pru, we call it a Pru, would also go above and beyond, because the environment was so good, because you felt you were part of a huge team and a huge organization which cared about you. You kind of made sure you did more to make sure we were being successful as well. So yeah, it was an amazing experience.
And that, it's interesting hearing you say that, like Friday afternoon, everything kind of winds down, people get together and actually have a conversation. And it's not that you've wound down and you want to go to the bar and you want to do happy hour just to kind of drink away your problems and your frustrations of the week. Yeah. Actually, you stop and you have a social interaction with people. And I know Holland, or certain areas in the Netherlands, when I was living there, they're very kind of big on this kind of a four-day work week and finishing at a very specific time. You don't take your work home with you. And there is a big focus on businesses going to 4-day weeks, in some places 3-day weeks, because and we're experiencing this with COVID-19. People are getting more work done because they're at home and they're getting it done in shorter amounts of time. They're getting more attention to it. And like you say, you're willing to give more because when you get to Friday afternoon, I've done more work, I've contributed, I've added value. Now I can actually have a moment and enjoy this, this social interaction. You just don't have.
And I think one of the things you just reminded me is kind of, it was the first company I've worked for, but it also didn't have the presenteeism mindset. So lots of organizations, and I've got lots of friends across London, Italy, Amsterdam, suffer from organizations which feel people have to be there to make sure they're doing the work. Right. This was back, as I said, in the late 80s, early 90s. And still, if the focus was on what you did, what you produced, how you contributed, and it wasn't measured by you being sat on a seat with a screen in front of you doing stuff. It was measured on the contribution to the work, to the experience of our customers, to the project, to the team. And again, that environment, that kind of mindset, really, really important, I think, in terms of, especially in this day and age as well.
Amazing. And you're talking about that from kind of 30 years ago. It is. And there are more organisations now focusing on that. Whether the Pru is doing that now, I have no idea. But is organisations are moving to that idea. And one of my predictions for the workspace is certain businesses will fail when they continue to go down that. How many hours do you spend at your desk? And stop people from home working and bring them into the office to force them to do that. Because actually, those people are only 60 to 70% engaged in their work anyway.
Yeah.
And they're only filling potentially 5 days of work with stuff because actually they're ending up having a negative conversation at the printer, or they're going for a cup of coffee, or they're doing this or whatever. You know, they're not 100% attentive all the time. Whereas actually they could be at home, and some of them are doing the same amount of work in 3 days, getting it done, but actually creating another 2 days where they can focus on personal development, where they can focus on being with family, and they will be more productive in those 3 days, getting what you say, you know, what needs to be done.
Yeah, and I think that kind of that model of having a space to work and actually collaborate and be with your colleagues and interact, but also having a space where you can do what you need to do. You could do it from home, you could do it from anywhere, because we have laptops, we have Wi-Fi, you're pretty much sorted. And I think that kind of is the way forward. I've read, especially over the last couple of weeks, with lots of organisations who are now heading to an environment where the head office concept is kind of being wiped away. To me, that's kind of one extreme too much. I think you still need a space for people to interact, to collaborate, even just to socialise and have that kind of bond because you work for the same company. But definitely a hybrid model where you can benefit from being flexible. You know, everybody who has a child in the last 3 months may not have liked working from home and homeschooling. It might have been a bit of a nightmare trying to homeschool, but when the kids go back to school, the ability to work from home with the headspace, that would still be appealing. But also then being in the office and seeing your colleagues, that's also appealing. So for me, it's kind of, it's the best of both we need to be moving towards.
We need, and exactly that, they need to be the fit of, and for some people it's great, and for some people it doesn't work. Some people need to be in the office 4 or 5 days a week because that's what they need. And some people don't, but it's like you say, it's on certain projects for certain people. Actually, I would rather be at home this week for 4 days because I can do this, this and this and this. I can get more done.
Yeah.
And maintaining that results focus rather than the being present and at the desk and feeling like you're shackled to that and you're making excuses to go and create spaces. Actually pay for results. You pay on a results service. I think, and again, it's another prediction. I think certain businesses will also fail when they go down that route. Oh, you can do the same amount of work in 3 days. Here's an extra 2 days worth of work. And in fact, here, have some more responsibilities and see how many hats you can switch between.
Yeah.
So we can squeeze an extra ounce out of it. And I can foresee certain businesses doing that. And again, that will be the number 2 thing that will cause that engagement to drop, and people will go elsewhere looking for that to re-equalise that balance in their lives.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to agree, because I think with the Netherlands, where I'm based as well, it's a model of people being able to work from home very well. They have a great model. There's, as you mentioned, a 4-day week, but there's also a balance between people not having too much, what's the word, or too little of a gap between work and home, and integration between the two, where sometimes it becomes one, which it should never do, and then actually doing too much from home as well. And I think from what I've seen over the last few years, there's always a risk of taking the stuff home, and because you haven't got the mechanisms which make you stop work, you just carry on and carry on and carry on. So I think there's also, with the work from home, being aware that leaders also kind of need to know how to educate their teams to make sure they know when to stop as well, and also role model when to stop. You know, the whole days of emails at 8 o'clock at night or on a Sunday morning, that kind of behavior doesn't also then support working from home or having a hybrid model, because it kind of entices your teams to then go, oh, okay, we've done it, I need to respond. So there's also that balance as well from a well-being perspective, I think.
Yeah, there's a couple of rows down here. One, and I didn't twig this, I have challenges with the model of schooling as it is. It's a very archaic system. It's very slow moving, and more often than not, it's responding to the external world rather than actually creating the foundation for the real world.
Yeah.
And actually, you're doing homework. You know, we all know it, but I didn't twig this. The 2 words, home, work. Oh, now I get what they're doing. All they're doing is kind of they're kind of part of that indoctrination process to build you up that, oh, when you go and do your 9 to 5, fantastic. Oh, by the way, there's a little bit extra that you need to do to make sure you're filling your quota.
Yeah.
But like you say, it's that role modeling behaviours. we need to go back and shift the behavior in ourselves and stop working from home, because that's home. And I'm not saying that the two things are uniquely separate. You are the same individual. You are Derek Bruce when you go to work. You are Derek Bruce when you're with your family. It's the same person. There is no divide. It's the separation, though, of having time to clear your head, be with family, be with friends, be creative, do work, whatever that looks like. But not disassociate yourself from your family, because we understand the challenges that go with that. Just because you're doing some extra hours every night at work to make things work. No. But leaders feel that when they get to a certain level, that the phone has to stay on, that they have to be on call all the time. It has to look like this, and they're being reactive and they're putting out fires, and then they wonder why. Now, over the course of time, they either burn out or they're just abjectly miserable because there isn't a switching off point.
Yeah, and I remember I had a real good conversation with one of my old leaders who made a point of, he made a couple of points. One of the point was, within his diary, he only schedules 3 meetings a day maximum. And if there's a 4th meeting, one of the 3 has to go, or the 4th is goes for the day, to make sure he has the headspace to do some work as well. And that's something which I think the last year I've kind of really taken to. And even with the COVID, it's been a challenge, because every meeting is obviously Zoom or Skype or Teams. But I think that kind of behavior where he was actively saying, as a leader, I make sure I balance what I do so I'm not overwhelmed. Because if I'm overwhelmed, I can't perform. If I can't perform, it impacts you as my team, and impacts you as my company, and impacts me as a human being. So that was a really interesting take on just balancing the work-life balance as well. But the other thing he was saying was he actively tells his team to kind of just be honest and transparent with each other. And when they feel someone's kind of crossed the line, they have a mandate to be honest and say, look, are you okay? Because you should be doing this, or are you aware that you're kind of putting pressure on us by doing this? And he said, just by giving people the responsibility but autonomy to have that discussion and have like a self-managed team, meant that the environment at work, and it was better. It felt more balanced. And they didn't then have a concern of the well-being being a big issue. But it is, he did say, but it was a struggle, because it's not instinctive to do that kind of behavior.
No, and that's the thing, is we don't get taught how to do time management or set a diary up. And I teach, now that takes it up another level from me, because I know full well that if I've got back-to-back meetings, if I'm working in one end of the building and I have to get to the other, well, if my meetings are back-to-back, I'm going to be late anyway. I'm guaranteed 9 times out of 10 that meeting's going to overrun, because people like to chat and so I'm already late, then I'm even later, and you have no time to decompress before you get to the next meeting. So I tell people to kind of book your meetings at odd times, at 5-2, and to finish at 10-2, so you've got room to play with. But at the same time, if you've got 7 meetings in your diary, regardless of whether they're 50 minutes or 60 minutes, all you're doing is having meetings, and you're not actually getting anything done. Which is why you then end up working from home and then doing all the actions that you need to catch up on, because you haven't. I like
it. It is a modern kind of challenge, and I must admit the whole COVID thing has kind of presented a different challenge in terms of, because people were at home, or still are in some cases, and then the assumption is, you're at home, you're not doing anything, so we can have a meeting. And so it's kind of, I think for myself, for the first couple of months, it was kind of pushing back, saying, yes, we can talk, yes, we can have a meeting, but you do realize I still have all the same work I had beforehand, and so do you. So let's make sure we don't have 7 meetings, because there is no need sometimes. It was also that kind of, the virtual experience of working the last few months has also been a challenge in terms of people just working and trying to blend a new working environment as well, and how that works with home and other colleagues as well.
And as you're saying that, I'm coming up with an idea that it might even exist already, that makes your Outlook calendar even more robust, where rather than just having those slots in to say whether you're out of office or busy, it actually across a network forces people not to book it. So if you try and book a meeting in my diary at a certain time, it just says no. Rather than you sending it to me and then me having to propose a new time and then you having to go and check it and no, it just says no. And then you kind
of... I think I've kind of done that. So I actually just block in time every week across each day, random times. Literally, if anybody sees it, it's kind of like, okay, that 2.5 hours locked, I can't do anything. And I must admit, it's kind of after a few months of people going, yeah, but can we still, like, no, it's kind of now, it's kind of stuck there. And occasionally, if it's something which is ever so urgent, business critical, okay, fine, I can allow that. But again, it's kind of giving yourself permission to do that. Because if I realize, if I look back and before I did it, the quality of what I do, the quality of how I interact with my team, my colleagues, our customers, stakeholders hasn't changed. It just means I can get stuff done, basically, as opposed to doing unbalancing it.
Yeah, but it probably means actually you give them a better quality of experience, because you're saying, in this time slot, I'm going to do this. Okay, get my information out, get creative, do my thing. Okay, and I know this is going to happen, rather than I'm doing this thing, I'm rushing to get this thing done because I know I've got to have this meeting and I haven't got any other time. Actually, you can be present, in that space.
Definitely.
Vital. Oh, crikey, time is flying. Okay, we could do this all day. I have a funny feeling. No, nothing to be sorry about. This is what it's all about. So look, we've already started covering some of these boxes. I want you to get focused on this, though. In your opinion, when you're looking at work environments, what does a work environment include?
For me, I think one of an experience I've had, and this is, I don't know if it's because I'm a very visual person as well, but one of the things is it has to kind of feel somewhere where you're inspired to go to. And it may sound really, really, really odd, but everybody has that wake up on a Tuesday morning, it's foggy outside, there's traffic, or the metro or the tram is busy, or you've got to, whatever, and it's kind of like, I just don't want to go in. Everybody has that every now and again. The environment in terms of physically, before we get into the mental piece of it, to me has to be kind of inviting, has to be kind of place where you think, okay, regardless of all this, I want to go in because actually it's a great place to work. It's a physically great place to work. I understand when I walk in what my organization's about. I see the brand, I see the people, I see the values, I can associate with this. So from that perspective, for me, the environment is really important, because if we're talking about having a hybrid where people can work from home, it has to be more enticing than working from home, if I'm perfectly honest. If you can think, I can work from home and it's beautiful, but I should go to office, it has to be more enticing. So from a physical perspective. From a mental perspective, I think it also has to be kind of psychologically safe. It has to be a space where people have the feeling, have the ability to be the best they can be. And that's for people who all understand what the goal of the organisation is about. We all understand why the values are important and live with values. And it aligns to kind of their purpose to be in. Because if you can rationalise what you do in terms of why you exist and then what that means for you working for that company, it then means you're really bought into why you're working for that company and that particular job at that time as well. So I think it's kind of people make the environment, and working around the right people with the same kind of goals and attributes and values and vision. But the physical space has to also be enticing, because if you think about, you mentioned family and kids, we spend more time currently, if you think about when non-flexible working, in an office than we do at home. We spend more of our thinking time there. And so it has to be a place where it works, where people work, where everything just kind of ensures that you can be the best you can be. And also you can come to work being who you are. I think the inclusivity in terms of, I remember years when I started working, we had the dress codes. It would have been a suit, a shirt, for ties, and over my career, through banks, media, fashion, and different industries, it's kind of evolved in terms of what people wear to work. But I remember early on in my career, people thinking, I've got to go and buy a suit because that's how we work here. But I don't feel comfortable in a suit, and I don't see customers while I'm wearing a suit. And you could see there's like that 2-3% of a person just like, okay, I'm not comfortable. As even simple things like dress codes loosened and people became more comfortable in terms of how they came to work. Obviously not the extreme of the IT, t-shirt, shorts, flip-flops kind of stuff, but the still business professional. You could see some people flourish because they were themselves and they weren't kind of putting on a facade as well. So for me, the environment people work in, the space they work in, the people they work in, has got to be one which sets people up to be success in the jobs they're doing and the companies they're working with. And I think that's why, in terms of retail spaces and design and how organizations have evolved their head offices. That's why that's been such a big investment over the last few years, because people think when they're here, they need to actually want to be here and stay here and enjoy being here to get the best out of it as well.
That's a nice take. I like it. Yeah, I think about the offices I've worked in. It's chipboard desks, with the laminate on it. It's the same desk for for miles and miles. It's the same chairs. There's very little personalisation. You go in, you might as well be in a cubicle.
Yeah.
There is very little creativity. Now, I'm thinking about my office here. I've got stuff up here from my family. I've got kind of inspirational quotes that I've picked up over the years. I've got a cuddly octopus up there from my daughter for Father's Day. You can see there's a scorpion that I was given. Yeah, but there's all this stuff going on. I've got my crazy messy desk, but it's big for me to create on, which is why it's a bit of a mess. That's over there. But if you think how many organisations individuals in organisations have that potential, not many. And it doesn't matter what department you're in, you need to be creative. Actually, as a leader, you need to be creative. As a customer service representative, you often need to be creative with your solutions. And whether you work in commercial, marketing, IT, actually you're creating. You're everyone. We're human beings. We're creative beings by nature, whether we believe it or not. But actually, does your space inspire you to create something better, to create a better opportunity, to a better experience for someone? Or are you just going in to be a robot? And is that really creating that psychological safety for you? Or are you just turning up and barely being present?
Really minimal. And I must admit, there's been a couple of places where I've worked in the last couple of years. So we have an office for Signify in Germany, which is, they've kind of really tried to make employees feel the brand. So there's actually an office, there's a room which shows all the stuff we do at Signify. The same in the UK, it's kind of just really making you feel it. And you can, as you walk in, you can see and feel the difference people feel with regards to the brand. I had the same when I worked at ABN AMRO. They had a concept called Yellow, which involved coffee areas, sofas, huge rooms with huge boards, people going around the office on scooters, which was, and ABN AMRO was a bank. And it was like, wow, this is kind of unusual. But again, it kind of, you could see the difference when the space was changed in terms of people's creativity, the enthusiasm and engagement as well. And I remember a friend of mine used to work for Innocence Movies. And one of the things they did around environments was around people didn't have departments. They just plopped people to sit in different places randomly. So everybody kind of knew what happened in the organization. So you didn't have marketing here, sales here, finance here. It was kind of a salesperson, a finance person, an HR person, all sitting together. If you needed a functional department meeting, you then got up and you collaborated. But you sat and you positioned and you rotated around the organization so everybody met other parts of the organization so you knew the bigger picture as well. And I think Innocent kind of had a DNA which made it easy. It wouldn't work across all companies. But from an environmental perspective and an engagement, it was interesting to hear my friend talk about how cool it was for them as well at that time.
And actually, there's two ways of going that. One is I've been talking to some of our clients and some of my coachees about this and encouraging them to do that. So even if you're doing it once a month, having a coffee conversation almost with them, what's going on in your side of the business? That way you get to see what their challenges are. You also get to see maybe you have some solutions that you can offer or you can give to them that they can then go and implement themselves. You also find out about potential problems that may be coming downstream to you in the next 3, 6, 9 months, which makes life easier because you're not then being surprised by it, because no one likes being surprised. So it's just like that cross-fertilization, pollination, cliche business thing, but just speaking to people and connecting. And then the other side of it, you talk about that creativity, and I might say something, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. So when I lived in Holland, I thought that the bank card, the bank security system that they used to use in Holland, so you put your card in, you've got the chip and pin, mind blowing. This is 2002, 2003. We've moved there. We've got bank accounts with ABN. Amazing. And then we moved back to the UK, and then I think Barclays bought into ABN or bought ABN, something like this.
I think HSBC, I think there was a link at the time, maybe.
And then Barclays Bank bought over the chip and pin system to the UK. And then they started winning awards for these huge innovations in IT security. I'm just like, hold on, the Dutch have been doing this for about 10 years. So I'm
Yeah.
not surprised you're saying this, this creativity piece of that's what it's about. If you're creative, you can come up with new ideas before A, your competition, or B, before you make yourself obsolete. You're constantly developing your thinking to do the next thing,
Yeah. And I think it's also and the environment, the question you asked, is also important, because if we do, and I think, as you said before, a lot of organizations will kind of move more towards a flexible hybrid model where people can work from home, people can work from an office. So the space which will be office based kind of has to also adapt. It kind of has to, as I said, kind of be branded to make sure you understand this is company ABC, but also allow the innovation and creativity to happen, and also the cross-fertilization of people when they do meet physically as well. So I think there's also going to be kind of like a tipping point for retail space, especially for offices, in terms of how they look in the next 5-10 years as well.
And it might be that, okay, if more people are working from home, they're able to get more work done, and in a smaller amount of time. That maybe you have 1 day a month or 2 day a month where you have kind of this hackathon kind of idea where people just get together and just throw ideas at a wall, because you've got more space to do that in your workspaces.
Yeah, which would be amazing if you think about it, because everything else can be done online, which is kind of the irony.
Yeah, but then it's important that we don't lose, and we're going to talk about healthy work environment. We don't lose that connection with each other. We purposefully create times and spaces for people to come together to do that. To work on their individual projects, great, but also to collaborate and come up with new ideas and come up with new projects and do it on a regular basis to keep the thinking developing.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the bits of feedback from just colleagues and friends, in terms of, we're now, I think whatever we are now, June, and they said, like, I've loved the working from home, but I have missed colleagues. I have missed coffee. I have missed just the lunch. And I don't want to do the whole 5-day week because I don't think I need to. But I do also miss that, just the interaction, the camaraderie, the random conversations, the anything at all, because we're human beings. So that inclusivity piece in the environment is also really important as well.
And I think, as you're saying that, so looking at, for me, kind of the pessimistic view of office life, because I look at the statistics and I know what the statistics are saying. There's huge swathes of people that aren't happy in their work. There's huge swathes of people that don't actually believe in their company values. And a large portion of these conversations that people are having when they're in the workspace often are negative, because they feel trapped in that space and they're doing it. Whereas if you go to this model where people can get their work done, get really focused, and then come to the office and have productive, wholesome, creative conversations, actually, you create a space over here to get work done, and then you create a space over here to have productive, creative conversations. Actually, you find in my head, some of that negativity starts to disappear, because we haven't got time to be negative because we're too busy being creative.
Yeah, and the stuff which you've been negative around, you can kind of resolve when you're trying to do stuff, because you then just interact with the people you need to fix it. And I think that's a really valid point. There's a lot of research which kind of shows, as you said before, a lot of percentages of people who aren't engaged in the office, and a percentage of time which isn't spent being productive. And if you can twist it around, where it's ultimately going to be, when I am there, I'm going to be something which I want to be doing. It's engaged and it's creative. And again, we are kind of still being aware that there are some roles which have to be office based, but just some roles which you need to be physically in office because it is what it is. And I think that is what it is as well. But I'm still thinking around the roles where you have that flexibility to do both.
But even then, those people that are office based, potentially because people don't need 1,600 seat or offices anymore, the things start to kind of know, actually, you reduce some of your overheads on a huge building that looks like this, you intensify the space that you do need based on your reductions of rents and what you can put into office furnitures and inspiring spaces and things that make people, all of a sudden, me being at work is fun, because you channel all of this budget into doing that, and it suddenly becomes interesting. So purely from how you see the world, what is a healthy work environment then? We've already started touching on what would you say is a healthy work environment?
I think for me, healthy is basically one where people can be honest, one where people feel trusted, one where people are transparent, and as I said before, one where you all kind of have the same ultimate goal. I think you mentioned there that there's discussions, negative conversations. For me, a great work environment is kind of where you have the challenging conversations, the courageous conversations, because you want to improve stuff. You have the ability to have those because you feel safe to do that and have those conversations. You have the ability to be open, you have the ability to make mistakes and not feel that's it, I'm out. So a healthy working environment for me is kind of creating a space where that mindset is kind of a baseline, because then everything flourishes from that point onwards. And if you haven't got that kind of the trust piece, the psychological safe piece, you haven't got the transparency or the openness, but also the ability to feel it. If you make a mistake, it's one of those things to learn from, because we're going to be better and we're all going in the same direction. That's kind of where you then get the unhealthy kind of environments. And I mean, I've been lucky enough not to have worked anywhere near that in terms of my career, but I've spoken to people who kind of dread going into the office or dread going into an environment because they know if they say something, if they do something, if somebody makes a suggestion, then you've got to agree. And I'm kind of like, oh wow, that must be awful. And you can see the person I'm speaking to kind of like physically talking through it, and the body physically going, oh, it's so hard. So for me, it's a lot around putting in place mechanisms where, as I said before, people can be the best, people can perform, and that is also through the people around them having the same kind of mindset and what that means as well.
I love, one of my values is challenge. Everything I do is about challenge. And I've done it all my life. You know, ever since I can remember, it's always been about causing challenge and being challenging. And through coaching and through leadership development training, it enables me to focus that value and that energy in the most productive, positive way possible. And to have an environment where it is not only challenging and courageous. I couldn't think of a better place to work, because even now, you know, sometimes I have difficulty articulating myself in certain situations because it's frustrating or my mind's gone somewhere. But to have a place where actually I would feel safe just to kind of even rant that out, or, you know, kind of thrash an idea around with someone, you know, it would be liberating, and I would be able to move through that so much faster in comparison to previous jobs I've worked in, environments I've worked in. I could move through that quicker and actually come out with some ideas and solutions on the other side, which are beneficial to me and the business as a whole, rather than me just sitting there frustrated. I can't say anything because I will be deemed as the problem child. And if I'm the problem child, you know, and again, yeah. You know, you're sitting there kind of trying to keep quiet, and you feel like the problem, and you can't come up with a solution because you're too busy feeling like, you know, you can't feel both of those things at the same time anymore. So yeah, I like that idea. I like that idea a lot. I think I might have, if I end up with my own office from my own business one day, this will be the environment I'm building. So, so how do you create that sort of space?
Well, for me, I mean, in my role with Signify, it's specifically around the leaders and the development of our leaders, and kind of having first and foremost the DNA which comes from our values, and the values are applicable to everybody, but it kind of gives us a baseline which says, if you work with us, these are the kind of things we expect, and they're not, you know, groundbreaking. It's kind of just common decency, really great basic kind of human value type stuff we want to do. But it's also having leaders who encourage that, who support that, and the development we do for our leaders definitely focuses not as much on the strategic, on the blue, on the process KPI driven stuff, because our people come in with a lot of that stuff anyway, and we can support them. It's very much around how our leaders support the people to, as I said, back to Prudential, to be the best they can be, focusing on, you know, being authentic, focusing on having the right kind of emotional intelligence, focusing on being able to have those open conversations. And even simple things like, as a leader, being able to say, look, you know, I don't know, but I've got a great team around me. What do you guys think? And that, even that kind of transparency and that openness kind of then radiates environments where people think, okay, well, if they say they're not quite sure, but they tap into us, if we don't know, it's okay. And we can make sure we find out as a team as well. So there's elements around that which help us within Signify at least create the right kind of space. And it's also around identifying and recognizing when people do the right things. I think we as human beings are very good to kind of, I went to a really bad restaurant, it was awful, 50 people know. I went to an awesome restaurant, maybe 3 or 4 people know. So it's kind of also twisting that around to say, you know, when also we have people who do live the values, leaders who do the right things, people who make sure the environment is the best it can be because we've kind of given the tools, the skills, the support, mechanisms to do that. Let's also recognize it, let's praise it, let's reinforce it so it keeps on happening, as opposed to like assuming that it's going to happen and taking it for granted, because it still needs to be worked at. It doesn't happen on its own. It still needs people to come in to do the right kind of things. So for me, it's giving the leaders capabilities to lead. It's giving people understanding what their expectations are and the ability to be themselves. But it's also around kind of saying it, making it obvious. Because again, a lot of the things around how you work, what you do, what we do as an organization aren't that explicit. So you kind of, you join and it's kind of like, okay, well, I've read some values, I've done a bit of onboarding, I think this is what we do, off I go. As opposed to, okay, this is the kind of things we really want you to do, what we think is important to us, how we want to support you if you're not quite there to get there. And having those conversations.
But even, yeah, and for me, even if it was looking at your personal development, and this is the way I see it, looking at your own personal development plan, here's the core 5 values or expectations of the business. Okay, great. I know what they are. I know what that looks like. There's almost like a bars process where you kind of, this is, you know, you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you kind of you know what's expected. Here's my role as a leader. This is what's expected of me. It's not of, like we know with many managers and leaders, is great, you're good at this, here, have a job as a leader, we'll see you in 12 months time for your end of year appraisal, let us know how you get on. No, it is like, this is the expectation of your role. You need to be doing this, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this. These are the people that are going to help you do that, and this is how we're going to remove the obstacles. But then also having sight of where you want to get to as a leader, or where you want to get to inside the business, and having a second block of skills, knowledges, and things you want to be focusing on, which are, so you're doing all 3 of those things. You know, you're not losing sight of what the company expectation and what you contribute. You're not losing sight of who you are in your role, and you're also not losing sight of where you're going to get to inside that role, or as part of your future progression as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for us, just to add it, it's kind of where I've worked in most of the companies have also kind of had like the moonshot kind of leadership principles or competencies, which kind of also, like, you know, if you had a persona or the ideal person, these are the 5 or 6 things you'd actually want them to be doing every single day, with descriptions of how you can get there and what we kind of do. And we've realized having that also just helps people go, oh, okay, yeah, this is where I can improve. Because if we don't give people kind of a direction, if you think of it going from point A to point B, if there's no point B, then how do you know you're going to get a point B? So for us, it's also for the principles, but also the fact that they're also aspirational to a point, because they need to be something which we need to keep aiming towards as well. Otherwise, you think, oh, I can do that now, I'm done. Basically.
I think there's 2 elements in that. One is you know to know where you are in relation to the top of the mountain, because if you don't know where you're going, what you actually climbing, is it your mountain? And where are you when the fog comes down? Where are you in relation to that? Do I know which way I'm going when the cloud lines come down and I've got no idea what's going on? Yeah. The other side of that is leadership isn't a one size fits all. So you could, like you say, you have these aspirational role models, you know, maybe 4 or 5 different people. I'm going to get a bit of that, I'm going to get a bit of that, I'm going to get a bit of that, and I'm going to then wrap that up in a version that is Derek Bruce, and away you go. But you're still moving in the right direction for the business based on values and behaviours, etc. For you and your experiences then, why is this important to you?
I think it's important for 3 reasons. I think the whole environment, inclusion, leadership, people being at work, it's important because, one, it's where you spend a bucket load of your time. It's kind of where you're going to be, or you're going to be focused on for a lot of time. And you only have one life. So for me, it's kind of make the best of it. And if I can make sure that somebody in the organization I'm working comes in and has the most engaged time they can have while in the workplace. And I remember before I answered the second point, there was a great lady from Adidas made a point, which was a question which was, if you asked anybody where's the best place you've ever worked, they don't always say where you're currently working. And she was saying what she'd want is people to say Adidas. And I'm thinking that's a great kind of thing. It's kind of like, I want people who come to work where I work to say, okay, where's the best place you worked? Actually, where I am now, because it's bloody awesome. So I think the engagement thing, I think, is really important in terms of making sure people, because we're doing a lot of it as well. I think the other thing is kind of people need to have a purpose. And if you have a purpose which is aligned to a great place to work, it kind of makes everything also valuable from their perspective as well. And I think for me, the third thing from just a personal perspective, I love what I do. It's kind of, I love the whole leadership stuff. I love working with people, developing people, seeing people move from A to B, and being able to help create that kind of space where they're successful, they're engaged, they're happy, they enjoy what they do. They want to come back on a crappy Tuesday when it's foggy and it's raining and nothing's working. But that's also the third reason, I would say.
And for me, purpose is a huge thing. I've done huge amounts of research into purpose, and I understand as a 42-year-old man how important it is. And it's not the word that many people use, especially younger generation. Everybody has a purpose. Whether you realize it or not, you have a very specific reason for existing, for being on this planet. It's a biological thing, you know, it's inbuilt into your DNA. What I find though, and what I have found, is a lot of people aren't able to express their purpose, or are using their work to express their purpose. And they feel because they can't express that, there's almost this divide between them and their work. And as a result of that unreleased potential, that unreleased expression, actually that's where the things like mental health come in, where you're talking about anxiety and depression, you know, because I can't be me. No, I have to put this lid on what I'm bringing to it in case someone else thinks wrong of me, in case I do challenge the status quo. I can't be courageous. So I bottle all this emotion up and I don't know what to do with it. And eventually that stuff just eats me from the inside out. And actually it's about creating a psychologically safe environment where someone can go, this is what I'm bringing to this company based on who I am. And it's not that they should be separate, it's that those two things should actually run concurrently. Concurrently, I think that's the right way. You know, is parallel.
It's aligned,
Yeah, completely aligned. Where I'm going gets me here, and it means that the business gets here as the same result. And at some point, maybe we divide because, you know, we outgrow each other at some point. That's also okay. Rather than thinking there is a massive divider, I can't be me in order to make sure I fit in. And actually, we know we're worried about whether you're meeting the grade, and because you're going through yearly assessments or all that. But like you say, it's having that purpose, knowing what your purpose is, knowing the best possible place to express that purpose. And it might be where you are in your life, whatever. It might be that you're the cleaner. It might be that you're serving burgers. It might be, you know, working in L&D. Whatever it is that allows you to express you at the highest possible level in the best possible way. Do that. And enjoy it. Crikey. It makes me angry because there's so few people talking about it. You know, what's next on your agenda? Because we've talked about environments, we've talked about inclusion, we've talked about psychological safety and creating work environments. What is next on your agenda for your work?
If I think from a work perspective, it's making sure the leaders kind of embed it from a signified perspective. So we're still doing, as I said, all the stuff you just said, making sure that happens every single day. So we grow as an organization. From a Derek Bruce Associates perspective, which is my other day job, it's very much around raising or continuing to raise the importance of a balance between race in organizations. It's very much around making sure we learn a lot of what's happened over the last few weeks in the US and the UK. We bring in opportunities for Black leaders, Black professionals. What I want to do for my own company is create an informal free networking mechanism where Black professionals can find out how do I do this? How do I get into this? Because I had that as a young black professional from a great mentor, but I see there's a huge gap where other black professionals can't kind of make that step up as well. So for me, it's kind of just really pushing that agenda, asking the difficult questions in terms of why is it such a difficult question, and then and just pushing for this whole equality piece as well.
So what's your plan in that space then? What does that look like for the future?
I think one of the things is, as I said, the mentoring network, and the great thing is I did an amazing article on LinkedIn and got some great kind of feedback. And some great people have actually reached out and said, can we help do this? So that's one of the things for the rest of June, was basically just to set up that mentoring network properly, engage the mentors, make sure mentees know they can access this for free as well. So it's kind of, it's not a paid thing, it's kind of want to make sure people support it. But also then sharing my voice within different organizations and saying, this is why we're not considering, for example, why do we not have a black board anywhere, a completely board for black professionals? And if we did, why would it feel strange to see? And yet every board we go into is kind of a whiteboard with a sprinkle of color. So it's kind of, for me, it was looking like also continuing to help educate my colleagues and professionals within the industry who aren't aware of some of the challenges which black professionals have. Looking at also opportunities for supporting black professionals, as I said, not just mentoring, but also recruitment when it comes to that, development when it comes to that, understanding also the challenges around mental health in black professionals as well. Because there's a lot of stuff where you mentioned not having a purpose, not being yourself, but where as a professional who's a black person, there's lots of things you kind of maybe not saying because the environment isn't your environment. It's kind of environment where you think, oh, should I be saying that? Should I highlight that? Should I let it go? So it's very much also just kind of bringing these things to the fore through articles, through conversations, through seminars, through the website, through speaking to people. So we can move this kind of, this topic forward. Because I think now is kind of a tipping point to move it forward as well.
I think it's a huge point. It's understanding, it's learning that communication piece because of, and like you say, what's been happening over the last few weeks, this has been an intensification. I talked about that before, that intensity of proximity. Actually, certain things are coming to the forefront. People's mental health is coming to the forefront. Why? Because they've got nowhere to hide. Certain conversations are coming to the forefront because everything's being pushed in front of us at certain points. And the stigmatization and the stereotyping, etc., that's gone on with the systemic racism that is prevalent in multiple Western cultures and in all over the place. I think from a mental health point of view, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I don't say anything because I will be seen as a problem, when actually you can multiply that into certain environments for young black professionals, actually because they're looked at for just being black, because they are being stereotyped, because there is even a black on black crime, there is this, that and the other. We've talked about that before. So I've got even more worry, I've got even more pressure, where I just want to be me and say what I need to be said. But if I say it, will that be deemed as, oh, there's so-and-so type person with so-and-so type skin colour?
With an agenda, for example.
With an agenda, whatever. It almost doesn't matter if it's black, Asian, Indian, gay, whatever. It's that having that additional mental health challenge of, I cannot say what I want to say for fear that it will be stigmatized or labeled accordingly. And then going into that mentoring piece and actually just teaching people how to communicate, to remove their own labels, or not even their own labels, to remove the labels that they think someone else thinks they put on them, to take them off, to express themselves clearly, articulately, professionally, and to be able to move that conversation forward and just remove I had this taught to me a few years ago, labels are Velcroed, not superglued.
Exactly, yeah.
But we stigmatize ourselves based on history or other, whatever, when we all know it's BS. Yeah.
And it's funny because, there's something, I posted an amazing, I think it was like a 3-4 minute clip from Muhammad Ali, which was Why Is Everything White? And it's from 1971, and he was being interviewed by Michael Parkinson. But it was kind of just he's beautifully articulate. He's kind of, you know, the most amazing speaker. But it was kind of just talking about the language we use and how that kind of sticks. And I think if I now go to 2020, there's language we use in an organization, there's kind of mindsets, there's perceptions. And I think for me, being able to push against that and have a conversation is important. And I think one of the phrases you used was black on black crime, which has kind of been prevalent since I was a teenager. And one of the things I read recently was kind of, why is there not like a white on white crime report then? Why is it only black on black? Why is it not white on white? And it's kind of like,
or even white on black. You know, it's just like,
yeah, it's one of those, again, it's creating this kind of whatever, I don't even know what the word is, but image which is negative, which doesn't even actually, when you think about it, make any kind of sense. So I think for me, you know, when you say what's next, it is very much, I am in a kind of a good position where I'm a very senior person in a great organization with a great network, with a great ability to have a voice. And I want to use it. I want to make sure that in, you know, 5, 10, 15 years, there's a succession of other great black professionals who've been able to actually do things without some of the crap, and I'll say crap, me and other colleagues who are, or network of black professionals have gone through as well. Because some of the time you think, how much talent hasn't got to somewhere purely because of the wrong colour? How much could an organisation, if you want to be really black and white, how much could they have made if they brought in this person?
Yep.
You know, how much different innovation would we have had if we had a better mix? So it's kind of just trying to push those barriers over as well.
It only takes one person to cure cancer.
Yeah.
It only takes one person to solve, you know, world poverty, whatever it is. And actually, where is that thinking? Where is that person? Where is that intelligence lying? And actually, if you go into an organization or a group or an ethnic group or whatever it is, and repress them in such a way, you're failing to tap into that level of intelligence. It's like computers. You know, if you want I've got my computer here and it's running a certain amount of, you know, if you put 3 of them together, that processing speed suddenly jumps up. And sometimes it doesn't just jump up by the number of laptops you get, it goes exponentially because it makes it easier. So if you've got a group of, you know, individuals that are enthusiastic, determined, you know, to make a difference, then the world becomes a better place.
Yeah,
it makes me emotional when I think about that. You know, if you just, but it's true though. If you just, even, you know, I've sat in offices and I've looked around and I've seen all these people that aren't engaged, that are frustrated, that, you know, feeling anxious or feeling depressed or whatever. I just think, what if we could mobilize just 10 of them? You know, and all of a sudden the world changes just by 1 degree. But we all know what happens if you change course by 1 degree over a long distance. The world becomes phenomenal.
And for me, it's kind of making that ripple. I think for me, the next step is making that ripple into a wave as well. Yeah.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm there. Look, where can people find you? I'm going to find the link for this article. I'm going to put that in the show notes as well. Where can people find you to start and continue this conversation?
Obviously on LinkedIn under Derek Bruce. There's Derek Bruce Associates, which is my personal website, so you can reach out via there as well. And all my details on Twitter as well. So I think it's Del Bruce, Instagram, basically all the social platforms you want to join. But yeah, but Instagram, LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to reach out, and I promise I will respond to every single contact.
Amazing. Look, if people were not paying attention to where this man's thinking is, you need to hit rewind, go back, get your pen and paper on, and you need to be taking notes. And I have no false expectation that your paper will catch fire from some of the nuggets of wisdom from the speed that you'll be taking these notes. Please go and find Derek. Please have a conversation. Please, if you are a young black professional in support and in need of guidance or that extra foot up that ladder, speak to Derek Bruce.
Yeah,
now.
Definitely now.
Right, done. Derek, thank you. I love you. I love what you're doing. I'm so very appreciative. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for being on this Sticky interview. And I look forward to sharing the next one with you all soon. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Firstly, massive thank you from the MBM team for tuning in to this Sticky interview. If you haven't already done so, now is the time to click subscribe and stay up to date with our new training videos and great interviews. And secondly, if you want to learn more about the skills we've been talking about in this episode, click the link and take a look at the MBM virtual classrooms. They're there to help you be the best version of you in the work that you do. Until next time, see you soon.